Hello Lotus, and welcome back to the most informative Lotus channel on YouTube, Auto Sugar. Today I'm going to walk you through the process of installing a new car stereo head unit into the factory wiring of the Lotus Elise. Now, a lot of this information is going to be universal, but I will point out a few considerations that are specific to the Lotus Elise, so you'll want to pay special attention there. Now, when you buy a new head unit, in the box you will typically receive a wiring harness from the manufacturer. This will have a plug that will connect to the new stereo itself and bare leads on the other end. Now, depending on the new car stereo that you buy, the connector on the factory wiring harness may or may not be the same as the pre-existing connector in the Elise's factory wiring. The Elise's factory wiring has a European Volkswagen style connector which is present on certain new Blaupunkt units, but if you buy a new stereo from Pioneer or Sony or Alpine or other popular manufacturers, chances are the plug that it uses is different from the one fitted to the Elise from factory. This is where a wiring harness adapter comes in. And for the Elise, one that I found works really well is the Metra 70-1784 adapter. I got mine for free when I purchased my new head unit from Crutchfield, which is one of the most popular online car stereo retailers. This is not a sponsored video, but if you do go to Crutchfield to buy your new stereo, which is a really popular place to do it, if you tell them what kind of car you're going to install your new stereo in, they will often give you a free wiring harness adapter kind of included when you buy the stereo. So that can be a pretty good option. If you're buying it from somewhere else, just keep in mind that part number that I mentioned. You may also want to pick up a wire cutter or a wire stripper if you don't have one already. And for this particular guide, I'm going to use a set of Posi Products car stereo wiring harness connectors, or caps as they are sometimes called. In order to connect the new stereo wiring harness to the wiring harness adapter, you'll need to go wire by wire and connect each one by color. Take your time and pay special attention to the colors that have stripes on them, as sometimes the stripes are very thin and hard to see, so just take your time and ensure that everything matches up perfectly. And you'll want to twist and mesh the copper wires together tightly. You'll then slide the cap sleeve down the joined wires and then screw on the cap to ensure that the connection is tight and that no bare wire is visible, so that you don't have to worry about wires touching each other and shorting out. You'll want to do this for every cable on the adapter, except in the case of the Elise, the yellow and red cables from the factory. The factory Elise wiring for the switched and constant power is backwards, and if you don't reverse the yellow and red connections, the new head unit will fully lose power when the car is turned off, and as such will lose all of its presets and memory every time you turn on and off the car. If you're installing the stereo into a car that's not the Elise, chances are you'll just want to match up the yellow to yellow and red to red cables, but it is generally a good idea to check out, the online forums for your particular car and find out ahead of time if there are any strange kind of variations on the typical wiring for your car, so that you don't run into problems. Once you're done wiring up the harness, we're ready to install the new stereo. So let's get back into the Elise. Once you're in the car, the first thing you'll want to do is remove the plastic trim surrounding your existing stereo. The easiest way to do this is with a flathead screwdriver, and I covered the tip of mine with tape to help ensure that I didn't scratch up the plastic surrounding parts. You'll want to gently place the flathead of the screwdriver on the sides and just kind of work your way around it and pry off the surround. Once you've done this, you'll be able to see the silver mounting sleeve surrounding the stereo, and our next step will be to free the existing stereo from the mounting sleeve. Now, stereos like this are held in their mounting sleeves by spring clips on either side of the stereo. Each stereo manufacturer has a slightly different shape, but fundamentally they all work the same and will need you to insert a tool to push out the spring clips holding the stereo in place. Every manufacturer makes their own tool and has a slightly different design for this, but if you don't have the tool that came with your car stereo, and most of us won't if it's the factory stereo, that's okay. You can also typically find some kind of a long, thin metal strip that you can insert down the channel on either side in order to push out the spring clips. This can take a little bit of trial and error, but keep at it and eventually the clips will come undone and you'll be able to pull out the existing stereo. Once you have liberated the existing stereo, go ahead and unplug both the cable for the antenna as well as the factory wiring harness connector and remove the stereo. Now, in my case, my car had already had an aftermarket stereo, albeit an older one, installed, and so there was also an additional wiring harness adapter installed, which needed to be removed in order to get to the factory wiring connector. My wiring may look a little bit different from yours, as my car had an aftermarket stereo already installed, and it had some extra cabling for USB connectors, etc., that may or may not be present in your car. And the next step here is to remove the existing mounting sleeve. Now, these sleeves are held in place by metal tabs that get folded up in various places to hold it in the dash. And in my case, as you can see, I had a little bit of trouble finding all of the tabs and where they were bent up, and that can be a little bit tricky because they're very small and they can be hard to see, especially the ones that are on the upper part of the sleeve. So take your time with this, and but if you don't need to keep the original sleeve, you can also just kind of bend the crap out of the sleeve and remove it. And as I was not having much luck doing mine cleanly, that's what I did. Now, once the old sleeve is free and removed, it's time for us to install the new sleeve that came with our new stereo. Go ahead and slide this in place, and then use a flathead screwdriver to start bending the metal tabs, which will secure the sleeve in place. You can identify these metal tabs because they'll be sort of cut out or perforated throughout the sleeve itself. And in the case of the Elise, the tricky part is getting to the ones up top. Once the sleeve is secure, it's time to slide our new stereo into its new home. And after connecting the new wiring harness to the existing factory wiring and connecting the antenna cable, it's time to slide it in. There's not a lot of room behind the dash here, and especially in the Elise, there's a lot of really sharp metal, so you'll want to be extra careful and maybe wear gloves when you're doing this to protect your hands. And as with lots of things with car stereo installation, it can take a little bit of trial and error to get things to fit. You'll need to get the cables situated in just the right way to give you the clearance you need to get the stereo fully secured. Just be patient and try not to jam things in too hard. You don't want to bend anything or pinch a connection or break any brackets. Once the new stereo is clicked into place, it's time to install the new surround plate. These usually just press on and click into place. If your stereo has a removable faceplate like this one does, go ahead and install it now. Now, one thing I forgot to show here, and it is good general practice, is that once you've connected the stereo to the wiring harness, go ahead and turn on the car's accessory power and test out the stereo and make sure everything works before continuing with the installation. If there is a problem with any of the connections, it's a lot easier to sort them out now rather than having to take out the stereo after you've already installed it and fix a wire. With this particular unit, an app is used to handle some of the controls, so it prompts me to connect via Bluetooth and download the app for further setup. In a future video, I will do a more detailed review on my specific head unit and my thoughts on its performance. Alright, so there you have it. Our new stereo is installed and everything is working perfectly. I'm going to spend a few days with this and drive around and test it out, and I will be following up this video in a few days with a review of this particular head unit, so you'll know whether or not it's a good choice for your Lotus Elise. Thank you so much for watching. Live long and Lotus, and this was Auto Sugar.